Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Joel Rosen, and I'm really excited to be talking to you today because I want to talk to you about genetic testing. If you know someone that is suffering with a thyroid problem, I pretty much guarantee, for the most part, that they have never even considered genetic testing for their problem. In our office in Boca Raton, Florida, at Boca Healthcare Center, we work with patients that suffer with chronic conditions. And what we've done to revolutionize our practice and, more importantly, improve the outcomes of our patients is we've included genetic testing. You see, in 2003, the Human Genome Project came up with a lot of results that we never knew before. And what that basically meant was we found out that a lot of our population is suffering with genetic mutations, or SNPs. And what that means is we lack, those that have positive results for these genetic mutations lack the ability to have things happen in their body to produce energy or to detoxify or to produce neurotransmitters that are important for our thinking and our happiness and our mood and our focus and our concentration and even our release of hormones. As well, we also determined that having these genetic polymorphisms can result in lack of detoxification or immune production so that we can fight off infections. So very, very important to consider that as part of the workup when you're working with a patient that suffers with a genetic mutation, because A, they don't even know about it, and B, they need certain substrates or nutritional supplements that are in their usable form. As an example, you may have heard of folic acid and the necessary requirements for mothers specifically that are holding babies for folic acid. What we've learned now in the nutrition world is the fact that folic acid can be very, very detrimental to patients that have a genetic defect and they're not able to process folic acid. Yes, it's very true that folic acid will help with neural tube defects, but the thing is that folic acid is not a nature occurring form of the B vitamin, and so people cannot digest or work with that particular form of folic acid, and therefore it's not being used. So it's very, very important to have some genetic testing performed. Something called MTHFR, maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. It's basically called methylation, and this is the process of where we add a carbon with 3 hydrogens to any different processes that happen in our body. And if you don't methylate properly, then you are not going to detoxify, you're not going to produce immune cells, you're not going to produce potential happy neuropeptides, you're not going to have proper GNA replication. And that's a really, really important process, and we see that a lot with our thyroid suffering patients. So what we've started to do is we've started to do genetic testing to determine if one is suffering with a genetic polymorphism like an MTHFR defect. In fact, I myself have a single gene of this genetic defect, and what that means for me is that I potentially don't have optimal production of my neurotransmitters, and I need to take a usable form of folic acid that I can absorb optimally, and that will help me. So if you are suffering, or you know someone that's suffering with a genetic polymorphism, A, you need to know about it, B, you need to supplement properly, and C, if you have a thyroid, or if someone has a thyroid condition and they're not knowing this information, they can go on and keep taking TSH, or they can take Armour or Synthroid or Cytomel or antidepressants, and it's not ever, ever, ever going to fix the problem, or at least help the body digest and use the proper substrates so that you can produce energy properly, you can detoxify properly. Very, very important. The next thing is heavy metal toxicity. The world we live in is more toxic than it's ever been. And so we have foods that have, or water or air we breathe, or fish that we eat that have a lot of metals in them. And if you have toxicity with metals, then potentially what's happening is you're turning on your cells that have these genetic polymorphisms, and then the next thing you know is you are suffering with fatigue or brain fog or inability to lose weight or not being able to sleep or being cold all the time or your hair's falling out. If this sounds like someone you know and you've never done any heavy heavy metal testing or genetic polymorphism testing, and all you've tested was your TSH, you're really, really missing the boat. And I'm sure you know or you've heard of someone who's very, very frustrated because they simply are not living the life that they want to live. Lastly, we do environmental testing, food sensitivities. Have you ever been told, or has anyone ever told the patients that are suffering with a thyroid problem that potentially gluten, dairy, eggs, soy, quinoa, almonds, black beans, hemp seed, there's so many, soy, we talked about, eggs. You could be eating, or someone could be eating these foods every single day, and because of the intestinal permeability and the inflammation in the gut, the immune system is reacting and creating inflammation, and then the next thing you know, that inflammation circulates in the body, goes and tells different cells to turn on or turn off, and then the next thing you know, you have these symptoms all over again. So it's very, very important to do food sensitivity testing. And then functional neurology. Functional neurology basically means if you are not metabolizing your food properly, you're not able to convert food into energy, then that energy is not going to the brain properly. And so if we have inflammation in our gut, we absolutely have inflammation in our brain. How do I know if you have inflammation in the brain? Well, we do a very, very thorough functional neurology exam where we have you touching the tip of your nose with the tip of your finger, doing repetitive movements, working on your balance. We also do 2-point discrimination, visual stimulation, focusing, and coordinated movements. We do all those exams, but if someone is suffering with a brain problem or they're not converting fuel into energy very well, then they will suffer with things like brain fog. Where did I put my car when I come out of the parking lot? Or who was I calling in the middle of a phone call and I don't realize who it is? Or where are my keys? Or all of these things are brain fog, and that's a problem. So patients that suffer with thyroid problems don't just have thyroid problems. They have brain-based problems, and we need to help stimulate the activity of that muscle, much like if we have a bicep problem and the biceps become weak or atrophy, we do bicep exercises. If we have a brain-based problem and the left brain or the right brain or the temporal lobe or the parietal lobe or the back of the lobe, they all are responsible for different functions, and we can stimulate that brain area so that it works more optimally. So if you're not doing a functional neurology program as part of your thyroid disorder, then potentially you are not helping to stimulate the activity of the brain. And then lastly, simple blood testing. I can't tell you how many times I'll see not enough blood results or not enough things being measured, like vitamin D is very, very important, uric acid is very important, homocysteine is very important, iron saturation and ferritin are very important. Vitamin D is very important. Thyroid antibodies are very important. All of these things, I can tell you, probably 75% of the time are not on the blood test. So A, you need to have those blood tests done. B, you need to have those blood tests converted on a functional tracker. And so that's what I do here. So when you bring in your blood work, I don't just base it on what the labs say, because the lab ranges are so broad. I base it on what functional what's considered healthy. So if you are being told that your blood tests are normal, even though you have these thyroid problems, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're healthy. There's a difference between being normal and being healthy. The way that they figure out what the lab ranges are is they take the average of all the people that have taken the test the year before, and then they average the high and they average the low. And if you're not as high or sicker than that average person, or you're not as low or sicker than that average person, you're told you're normal. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy. There, in fact, is a healthy optimal range that was determined by the Endocrine Society, that what constitutes healthy, and that's what you should be compared to. So what I'm going to offer you is I'm going to offer you a complete neurological examination where we do all those things that we talked about, where we talk about your 2-point discrimination and your sensory perception and your balance and your coordination and how well your eyes are moving from left to right, how you're smelling, how you're hearing, all these things we're going to do. And then we're also going to have you bring in your blood work, and I'm going to put it on a functional scale. At that point, once I determine what's going on with your blood tests if they're considered healthy versus normal, and if we find neurological deficits, then I'm going to make some recommendations to you. Those recommendations more than likely are going to include genetic testing to see which polymorphisms or genetic mutations that you're dealing with. Number two, we're probably going to recommend heavy metal testing. We can do urine samples, hair samples, and even homeopathic protocols, which we determine what is going on from the metabolic standpoint in terms of metal toxicity. Also, we'll probably recommend food sensitivities to determine what foods are you eating potentially on a day-to-day basis that are creating inflammation in your gut. And until you fix those, TSH, Armour, Synthroid is not going to fix that at all. Functional neurology, when I do a neurological exam, I'm going to say to you, okay, here's what we found. We found that the front of the brain on the right side is deficient and we need to stimulate through these brain-based exercises. Or your memory is off in the temporal lobe and we can stimulate that via smell and sound, and this is how we do that. Lastly, we're going to look over your blood tests and we're going to tell you what do we find in way of what's considered healthy versus what's considered normal. And you'll finally be told, oh yeah, oh my goodness, I can't believe that. I've never been told that I have anemic tendencies or my liver enzymes are elevated, or in fact I'm reactive hypoglycemic, or I have a chronic infection that no one's ever told me about. Once we do that, then we'll put together a care plan for you, explain to you what our best recommendations are. We can just put together a nutritional approach, or we can put together a all-inclusive functional neurology, detoxification, a metabolic improvement approach, a nutritional approach. Anywhere where it meets your specific requirement, that's what I'll do. Some insurance is accepted, some isn't. We'll also explain to you on that on the last day. And basically the time now is to give my office a call. We have a $75 offer. Regular price would be $450. For the first 10 people that call my office number is 561-883-0090, and tell them that you heard about my genetic testing protocol and you want to be considered one of the first 10. I look forward to meeting you and helping you in your quest to recover from a thyroid problem. Thank you so much for watching this video.